Hello, welcome to Endemic Times. My name is Amira, and today I wanted to discuss the costs of war. And these are the costs of war that unfortunately have for too long gone unnoticed, undocumented, and undiscussed by our mainstream media news outlets. So let's take a look. This information here is a collection of data that was done by Brown University. It's looking at each of these countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and others, and the total civilian deaths that have been lost because of the 9/11 war on terror. And that number has been noted as being around 897,000 to 929,000 lives lost. However, Byline Times examines the direct and indirect deaths of the post-9/11 era as a new kind of state-sanctioned mass violence became globalized and normalized. A key point that's being looked at in this article is the difference between direct and indirect deaths and the tallying of those indirect deaths that has not necessarily been done. And the Brown University information and data that has been collected was also used in this report, but this report dives much deeper into the indirect deaths that have been caused by the post-9/11 war on terror. And that amount has led to what looks around an approximation of 6 million deaths because of the war on terror. In the report, they discussed how one has to multiply that direct death number by an estimated 2 to 4 times to get the total number in the millions of who are dead today, who would not have been dead had these wars not been fought. So the majority of conflicts in the early 1990s, where we do have a lot of data, indirect deaths were around 3 to 15 times the number of direct deaths. Due to the impact of conflicts on public services and infrastructure, vastly greater numbers of people end up dying indirectly from the consequences of violence compared to the number that die from conflict. For example, in a place like Afghanistan in 2001, 6 months after the bombing campaign, although between 1,300 and 1,800 Afghans were killed directly, as many as 20,000 and possibly as high as 49,600 died due to the indirect consequences of military intervention. So in that case, the total number of indirect deaths was at least 15 times higher than direct deaths. They state that if that higher empirically substantiated ratio was applied to costs of war, direct death figures in Afghanistan since 9/11, which we've been told is around 176,000 people, it would imply that 2.6 million indirect deaths in that country to date would suggest that just in one country, a total of 2.8 million Afghans have been killed due to the war on terror. These are huge discrepancies in what we're provided. Now, again, these are things that are rarely discussed in mainstream media, so we're already not getting a full picture and a full scale of the magnitude of what the war on terror has done. When we look at applying this overall number and this empirical data when it comes to direct deaths versus indirect deaths, we're seeing that the indirect deaths are so much higher. And of course, that makes sense because when you ruin infrastructure, when you ruin the ability for people to get clean water and good food, that they're having to migrate, which is causing even more issues of security. It's incredibly dangerous as a migrant to be moving from one place to another because so many different parts of this region are being just thwarted with war and crime. So much attention is being paid to what's happening in Ukraine. However, there are so many other areas that have been affected by U.S. intervention and the war on terror that continue to this day to not be brought to light by the mainstream media. One of the countries that does not get enough airtime is Libya and the entire situation that's going on there. There's approximately 803,000 people that are in need of humanitarian assistance in Libya. There are 211,000 people that are most in need for humanitarian assistance in Libya. And of those, you can see here, 56,000 are IDPs, 18,000 returnees, 52,000 non-displaced, 41,000 migrants, and 43,000 refugees. And that's a total of 75.3 million that's required for humanitarian programming into 2022 until the end of May. Libya is already a country with a lot of turmoil. So the fact that we have people leaving other countries to go to Libya sadly says a lot of what's going on in their own home countries. But this graph here details what those demographics are and where these people are coming from. And that's from Niger, Egypt, Sudan, Chad, and Nigeria. There's 86% adults and 14% of them are children. Syria is another country that does not get enough media attention, and Syria is currently in its 11th year as being the largest displacement crisis in the world. There are 12.4 million people that are food insecure. There are 1.3 million that are severely food insecure and 6.8 people that are internally displaced. This is a report by the UN that's looking at what are the needs going to be in Syria and how many people is this going to affect. And as you can see, this is 5.6 million people, refugees and asylum seekers that are in neighboring countries, which includes Turkey. What are the country response strategies and how do people plan on and what do they expect to be the needs for these people? And as you can see that there is a huge budget impact when it comes to the Syrian Arab Republic as well as Egypt. They need between $465.2 million for the Syrian Arab Republic and $126 million for Egypt. In Iraq, there are 285,000 refugees and asylum seekers. 89% of them are Syrian. And for Turkey, there are 4 million refugees and asylum seekers, with 90% of them being Syrian and 4% being Iraqi. And this is similar to Lebanon and Jordan. In Lebanon, there are 98% Syrian and 1% Iraqi refugee and asylum seekers, with a total of 855,000 people. And in Jordan, there are 700,000 refugees and asylum seekers. 90% are Syrian and 8% are Iraqi. Why is this not being talked about on mainstream media? Yemen is unfortunately another great example of our mainstream media's inability to really discuss the issues, the lives that are at stake, the real casualties that are occurring, and the atrocities that are being inflicted on innocent men, women, and children. In Yemen, there are 20.7 million people that are in need of humanitarian assistance. 16.2 million are food insecure. 47,000 people are in famine-like conditions, and 4.3 million people are internally displaced. This was from February 18th of 2022 this year. The population of Yemen is 30.5 million. The people that are in need is 20.7 million people. There are 4 million IDPs in Yemen since March of 2015. There are 16.2 million people projected to experience acute food insecurity and 2.3 million children expected to experience wasting. So wasting is a very particular form of extreme malnutrition, and the numbers in Yemen of children that are suffering from this are huge, and it is so sad. It is devastating to this population, and that we have the amount of children in Yemen that are suffering from this and no one is talking about it is heartbreaking, and I feel for the Yemeni people. Just this year of January 2022, there were 420 civilian casualties across Yemen. 10,500 people in December and January were displaced, and funding from outside countries and nonprofits has completely dwindled. Relief actors in Yemen have actually reported a significant increase in the number of airstrikes across Yemen in 2022. The UN has recorded more than 1,400 airstrikes countrywide, which is more than double the 2021 monthly average of approximately 600 airstrikes. And part of the reason why this crisis is so bad is because now, with the Ukrainian crisis going on, funds are not making it to places that are also in need, if not more so. And that is what you can see in the situation in Yemen. What's happening in Ukraine is a very serious issue, and it should be discussed. Places like Libya, Syria, Yemen, Palestine, these are all nations that do not get enough light shed on the atrocities that are being committed in those regions. And those atrocities are being committed because of U.S. intervention and U.S. monetary support. The United States has a lot to answer for. What I hope that you can take away from this is that what we are told from our mainstream media is not always the truth. And very often, it's what they want us to be told. It's what they want us to hear. Be very mindful of when you see censorship, removals from platforms. Always be willing to question the narrative. These are things that I hope people take in mind that they keep in perspective when we look at the human toll and the human cost when we have these kinds of wars and encounters between nations. There's always a deeper effect. When we look at sanctions, it always affects the people that have no decision on whether or not they go to war. It doesn't affect the people at the very top. Please keep this in mind as we move forward in these discussions. They are difficult, they are very hard, but we have to have them. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this information was helpful. I'm going to provide links for all of the things that I've cited down below, and let me know what your thoughts are on this in the comments. I'd really like to get your perspective and hear what you have to say. And just remember, we're all human, we're all on a unique journey, and the best way for us to move forward positively is to have these kinds of conversations, as difficult as they may be. Stay safe, take care, and remember to be kind to each other.